Are they as harmless as we think they are? This simple garage sale bottle looks benign, but though it may not be inherently wicked, can we be sure that it didn't pass through malevolent hands or has some vile past? Generally, we trust the things we surround ourselves with, but the following three tales of innocent-looking cursed objects are going to have you questioning whether your stroke of bad luck is a coincidence or attached to something in your home. Now, you may question the validity behind the concept of curses, but that shouldn't stop you from determining which of these three supernatural tales are inspired by fact or fiction.
The line that divides the factual from the unreal has long since blurred. The tales we once thought fantastical, now implanted as true. To decipher verity from the imagined, you must break from the ordinary and consider a universe where the outlandish prevails. Can you expand your mind to see beyond our perceived reality? Can you decide what's fact or fiction?
It was a proud day for Mike Stetson, but he'd soon find out that the opening of his very own pizzeria would wind up being a nightmare he could never prepare for. We take the innocence of those items around us for granted, not considering what may be attached to them. And as Mike found out, curses come in all forms.
We've all seen them hanging behind the cash wrap. That first dollar bill received once a new establishment is open for business. For many, that bill is a symbol of luck and prosperity for their new business. Others simply like to use it to remember their roots and where the business started. Then, there are men like Mike Stetson, owner of a pizzeria that opened in the early months of 2014 in Hartford, Connecticut, who quickly found that not all dollar bills are alike. Like so many others, Stetson displayed his first single behind the register, framed in a cheap but workable picture frame. He couldn't remember who exactly had handed him the currency, but what he experienced once it entered his establishment was something he would never forget. It started mildly enough with the breakdown of a brand new oven. Covered under warranty and easily replaced, Mike thought nothing of it. But a day or two later, the replacement would break. Mike, frustrated, chalked it up to the business's growing pains. But the curious statement of a patron one day had his mind drifting to something more sinister. There's a heaviness in your restaurant. It wasn't a customer Mike recognized, but there was a look in his eyes that seemed to borderline madness. Though he tried to continue business as normal, a third oven would fail, despite being a different brand and installation team. On the same night, a flame sparked within the oven and threatened to burn the pizzeria down, while the alley behind it hosted a drug deal gone wrong. Both parties involved died in the shooting, one being killed instantly, while the other survived his mortal wounds into the early hours of the morning. Patrons started to talk about Mike's bad luck, some even suggesting that his restaurant was cursed. He thought nothing of it, allowed the locals to have their insane stories, and went about business. And then it happened. Mike received a phone call at around 2:15 a.m. on December 5th. By the time he reached the pizzeria, the fire had been put out, but the damage had been done. Though he expected initial reports to point to the oven, which he had replaced with an entirely different brand, there was no indication of where the fire started or how. Mike got his answer when he entered the scorched building and saw it laying there in near pristine condition. The dollar bill, still framed in a blackened case, sitting atop the rubble of the cash wrap.
Poor Mike. Can his misfortune be attributed to a lowly dollar bill? Maybe business wasn't doing so well, so he burnt the restaurant down himself. But then there's the patron, the one that felt something off about his pizzeria. Could he sense the negative vibes being emitted from the mysterious dollar bill? We'll have an answer for you at the end of this video, but for now, tell us what you're thinking in the comments section. Next, we have an old, ugly, antique mirror, the perfect example of trash to treasure. But as John and Marla find out, there may be something very strange about their new household addition.
John hated it. The moment his wife Marla brought home that gaudy golden frame and that imperfect glass, it grated on him in a way that seemed insane. It was a garage sale find, somebody else's garbage that now adorned his walls. She said there was a story behind it, but he let her tell it while his mind drifted to something more interesting. Weeks later, he wished he had listened. After the first few days, all seemed normal with the dirty glass and antiquated frame. But one morning, as he noted to himself just how ugly it was, something happened to the glass. The dirt that permanently coated the surface moved and parted, as if to take a silhouette of a shape. He questioned his eyes and his own sanity as the outline of a small hand appeared in front of him. He would chalk it up to an early morning, after a night of minimal sleep. But he wasn't the only one to have seen something in the mirror. It was 3 days before his wife had approached him and inquired about the unusualness about her proud find, wondering if he, too, had tried to clean the liquid marks that dripped down the glass. Though he hadn't seen such a residue, she was receptive to his visions of handprints, a curiosity she noticed when she bought the mirror, but thought it was a smudge from the homeowner's children. She relayed the story to him again, and this time he listened. He absorbed the mirror's history, its original place in an old Louisiana plantation, and the tragedy of the family that once owned it. He and his wife spoke in front of the mirror, and as she relayed the history, he swore he could see the handprints forming again. That's when she got to the part where a mother and her 2 daughters were murdered. John didn't care to hear the rest, figuring he knew how it ended. They let the mirror remain with them, at first wondering if their imaginations were getting the best of them. But the occurrences wouldn't stop, regardless of how much John and Marla tried to reason with their minds. The handprints returned, and that liquid stain refused to dissipate. It hadn't been a month when Marla decided she couldn't live with the possibility of owning a haunted mirror, and, with no objections from John, donated it to a local thrift store, feeling a slight bit of pity for whoever owns it next.
Was what John and Marla experienced a case of an overactive imagination? Could the dripping simply have been an imperfection in the old glass? But what of the handprints? Did John see them form right before his eyes? Or were they there the whole time, imprinted by the hand of a former owner's child? We'd love to tell you whether you should believe this tale of the antiquated mirror, but we have one more story to share. For now, let us know what you think in the comments. and then sit back for a story about a painting so haunted and cursed that it's known around the world. Or is it?
When Thomas came to the decision to become a firefighter, he expected to hear some weird stories. He'd heard of the lonely housewife that calls simply to garner the attention of the firemen of her local house, and the child that called in a panic because his ball got stuck in the roof and his parents refused to help. He never expected to have a weird story of his own to pass down, especially not within the first few months of joining the Mountain's Edge Firehouse. The start of it came with a case of arson, a homeowner tired of paying his overpriced mortgage. After the fire had been extinguished, Thomas took notice of something peculiar in the ruins, an unscathed painting that had somehow survived the raging fire. It was an unsettling depiction of a crying boy, a little too lifelike for his tastes. It was peculiar that the painting hadn't been burnt, especially considering the house was a pile of ash on the ground. But that peculiarity didn't quite hit him until a month later. When the call came in, the entire firehouse recognized the address as that of their colleague, Frank. Luckily, Frank nor his wife were home when the fire mysteriously sparked. But there was something at the scene that Thomas recognized. It was the painting, again found face down on the floor, seemingly untouched by the fire. When Thomas finally did get hold of Frank, once the shock of his damaged property subsided a little, he asked him about the creepy painting. When Frank found it in the ruins of the first house, he knew his wife would like it, and so he removed it from the scene, a revelation that started to initiate discussions of curses and misfortune. Thomas tried to ignore the claims of a cursed painting, but found it impossible to do so when, 2 months after Frank's fire, there was a third fire that the painting curiously survived. Frank swore he had the painting destroyed, yet there Thomas found it, coated in soot and nothing else. He attempted to rationalize the painting's presence at 3 different fires, but found himself unable to do so. His presence in the firehouse didn't last much longer, as he transferred to a quieter side of town, one more suitable for a child to be raised in, one not somehow linked to a creepy painting of a boy.
Could one painting cause so much trouble? Or was it just a matter of coincidence? Was the first house really a case of arson? Or maybe there was something sinister about this painting of a crying boy? But what about Frank's home? Clearly, he wouldn't have started the fire. We're dying to know what you have to say, so let us know in the comments.
Are you ready to find out if you can decipher between fact or fiction? Let's look back at tonight's 3 stories and find out which were born from reality and which were fabrications of the imagination.
Where do you stand on the story of Mike and the cursed dollar bill? Do you think there was some connection to reality in that tale? If so, we're sorry to say, but we fooled you on this one. This story was the creation of our own minds. It would be a tragedy to happen to a pizzeria, though, no? What about story number 2? The gold-trimmed mirror with a bit of ghostly handprint problem. Yeah, we probably made that one up on our own, right? There's no way it was inspired by a true story. Oh, but it was. The mirror in question is that of the Myrtle Plantation. As the story goes, the 200-year-old painting is haunted by the spirits of the Woodruff family's matriarch and 2 daughters. Their murderer was allegedly a slave named Chloe, who used an oleander-laced cake to poison them. Their souls are thought to be responsible for the handprints and dripping marks. Finally, can we trust a story about a fireman finding a cursed painting responsible for the burning of 3 homes? Believe it or not, you can. The story was inspired by The Crying Boy, a portrait of an adolescent boy. Legend has it that the Giovanni Bragolin painting was found in multiple burned-down houses across Essex, England, completely unscathed by the fire. While it's believed the original was covered in a fire retardant, there's been no follow-up on the other copies of the eerie painting.
How well did you do in tonight's video? Did you look past the deception of our world and define the off-blurred line that struggles to separate lies from the truth? Let us know in the comment section below. And should you find the urge to test your perceptions again, be sure to subscribe and join us next time when we ask you to decide what's fact